Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Easy Conversations, a podcast about having easy conversations. I'm your host, Furkan Dandia. In this week's episode, I sit down with Chris Wilson, who is the co-founder of the Unshakable Man Coaching Practice. Chris and I talk about some of his earlier childhood experiences, especially with the trauma he had from the relationship he had with his mother. And for years, Chris avoided dealing with that trauma until much later in life. By doing that work, Chris was so inspired that he decided to co-found the Unshakable Man Coaching Practice. I hope you can get a lot out of this episode, and if at the end you could leave a 5-star review, I would truly appreciate it. Joining the podcast, I appreciate you taking the time. Super grateful to have you on here, and I've already enjoyed some of the sessions we've had and the conversations we've had. So I'm hoping the listeners can get a feel for some of the things you're doing. But before we get started, I want to give you an opportunity to first introduce yourself, where you are, and some of the work you're doing currently in the Unshakable Man space as well.
Thank you so much for having me here on the show. And my name is Chris Wilson. I live in San Francisco, California with my fiance and our cat, Chesterfield. We've been locked in the same tiny apartment together here in the city for an entire year, and we are flourishing. And I would say a big part of the reason why we're flourishing is the brotherhood that I've been creating with the men over at the Unshakable Man. What do? We create spaces. I mean, you just got to experience this. We create spaces where men can take safe risks of vulnerability. And I like to say so that they can connect with who they truly are and discover how the experience of healing, connecting, and growing. And even as I say that right now, it's just like, it's so opposite of the opposite of the images of the messages we're given as men and as women, as human beings, of what is important and what is powerful and what is meaningful and what is useful, right? And even in just this morning, we had a breathwork session led by Brandon Grew, and there was a man in there. There's a man in the Netherlands that had come, and there was a man in New York City, and a man and a few men from California. And at the end of the session, without sharing anything that's personally identifiable at all, a group of the men all connected on the same thing, which was, man, I'm really happy I gave myself this. Like, one man was laying on the ground in his office, right? And another was like needing to leave. And he was like, man, I'm so happy I gave myself this. And then the other men chimed in too. And they're like, oh, me too. And it's this idea of like that. For me, I feel like I'm on the other side. I have now been doing this for 10 years. I'm now in the side of, other men are getting this too. Like not just me, not just one-on-one, but a brotherhood of 100 different men who are all appreciating this. And these men represent this image of this tough, masculine man that I still have in my mind. And they are appreciating simply showing up for breath work on a Wednesday to let go of their emotional residue and to sit with a group of men and to just be with how they are, whether that's joyful or angry or upset or sad, and to realize that I am not those emotions, but through experience, not just a man telling you it, right? And not like a coach or a therapist just working with you one-on-one, but truly through a connected experience of brotherhood. And that's what we do.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that, first of all, for me experiencing one session, so I can't speak to all of it, but just having that, like you said, brotherhood,
but not feeling judged, not feeling shame, just being, getting that freedom of being yourself. It's so important because we don't get that opportunity, whether it's in society or general, even within our friends. Like I find that you don't get that freedom. So I appreciate all the work you're doing and what you've created, because I think it is making a difference.
Mm. I'm really thank you for that. And I notice how curious I am right now because you I'm curious just about your experience going from being just a relationship on the internet to just getting to go through signing up on the website to coming in and coming into a Zoom meeting. What was that like for you?
Well, I mean, if I was fully honest, I didn't know what to expect. So I came in with an open mind. Um, I mean, I felt like it would be an experience where a bunch of men would be getting together and talking, and it was along those lines, but it was a lot more deeper than I thought. And like I said, it felt um I felt free. I felt like I wasn't being judged. I felt like I was myself. Um
Mm,
just being comfortable in my skin. And I think the brotherhood aspect of it that you talk about is so important, because you know community is important for me. And we all kind of go through struggles and adversity, and we often feel alone in those um times. And having a community of men that you can lean on is so important.
yeah, yeah. I honor you, man. It's and for coming in and with that open mind, that curiosity. I know for me, that was my path into this work was a big, I would say about 50% curiosity and 50% trauma, right? And
Mhm. Mhm.
right. And that there was an absolute need. I didn't really have a choice. It was like, oh, I need to figure out, solve some of these problems before my ship sinks.
Mhm.
And but I didn't intuitively, I didn't know what I needed. I didn't go
Yeah.
searching for a brotherhood. I didn't even know what men's work was. I didn't, and I think that's probably true for a lot of men that
Mhm.
like, it's hard. You don't miss what you know, never knew you could have.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And along those lines, like you touched on it. And one of the things I wanted to explore with you was, you started this uh the Unshakable Man like 4 years ago, right? And before that, you were in software sales. So what was your journey like? What brought you to this point? So I know you touched on it. It was, you know, in a way you needed to find a way so your ship didn't sink, as you said. But like maybe talk about what it was like, and what was your kind of point where you're like, okay, this is where I need to make a change.
Well, it definitely starts as a young man.
Mhm.
There's no way of removing my childhood experiences from what brought me here today.
Mhm.
Uh, I I grew up in a picturesque community in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, a um, tourist uh, just mecca,
Mhm.
a major tourist attraction in New England. And I grew up in a bed and breakfast, and I like to call it like the family farm. I got to see my dad every morning working and every night, and we didn't talk deeply together, but there was just this immense connected nature to my relationship with my little brother and my father from growing up in like a family farm. Right, we
Mhm.
were working side by side. But my relationship with my mother was very different. It's very traumatic. It's very up and down, creepy, scary, abusive, and traumatizing. And
Mhm.
yet, um, I didn't know that I was in as a young man. I didn't know that I was in a situation where I could say that I had problems because it wasn't something where my immediate, uh, it wasn't. I would have the police called on me at times by my mother, and take removed from the house, or I wouldn't know if she was going to be able to, if she was going to show up to pick me up from school. And only now, looking back as a 37-year-old man, was do I realize that I was I was a very angry young man, and I used that anger to uh, I connected with that anger in a way and found a constructive outlet of sport that I identified with fully and created my identity around, and found all of my meaning out of. But really underneath, I was an extremely angry, sad young man. And I didn't go to college. I ended up racing bikes, trying to make the US national team. And then after, when I was 22, I crashed, broke both my arms and my bike, and went from cycling to nothing, lost that identity. And then all of that energy, all of that intense energy went into, I need to find a job. So what do they both have in common for me is it was all about safety. Like I never felt safe, and I never felt trusting of my environment. And like it would be there, like would I have a roof over my head, or would she be there? Would she not be there? And my relationship with that was an intense anger, but I wouldn't even have said I was angry. I would have said, I'm tough. I'm a tough kid. Right. And the thing is then it was rewarded, right? I got rewarded for that toughness, for that brashness, and found my way into software sales. And with having not gone to college and not having a college degree and getting a job off of Craigslist and then working my way up, I thought of myself as a fighter. I thought of myself as a warrior, right? And really as an athlete, right? I went to military college for a year. I wanted to go into the Navy SEALs and everything. And it's like, this was what I had, even now I notice I'm scrunching my eyes. It's like, like who was this young man? Right. Like, but underneath what it really was just an anxiety. It was just constant. Just parts of my body felt ways that now I'm attuned to them. And I'm like, oh, that's anxiety. That's not, this is not you. This is anxiety. And so much so that I was getting itchy at times in my life. And I never associated that the itchiness I was feeling on my body, or the rash I was getting on my body, had anything to do with anxiety. Right. And so lo and behold, 5 years into my career, 7 years into my career, was at the peak of my sales career. I'd gotten an amazing job in San Francisco. And 3 months into the job, I started getting itchy, and I was having trouble paying attention. And I had previously overcome my relationship with ADD and stuff through brute force, right? By being tough and being intense with myself. And I got a massive anxiety attack in front of a 10-person boardroom, and doing the thing that previously had been my whole identity, that I had never been anxious. And now here I am in the peak of where I want to be. And I lost my vision in my left eye and almost passed out and got very scared. And immediately that I would say that was like my heart attack. That was the thing that woke me up. But it also was the beginning of my dark night of the soul, if you will, my 3 years of striving and thrashing, and I again did not identify as having depression. And yet for me, actually, this is kind of neat. This happened recently. I saw a picture on Instagram, and it was a picture of the incline in Colorado Springs, and it's this stairway on train tracks that goes straight up the mountain in Colorado Springs. And when I was at the Olympic Training Center, my grandma lived across the street from the Olympic Training Center, and that's how I had gotten into wanting to go to the Olympics. Was saying my grandma taking me on a tour, and then I put all that anger in as a young man into, I'm going to go get to grandma's house and go to the Olympic Training Center. And I did it. And I got there. And what did I do when I got there? I ran up and down this thing like 50 times, like tons of times, 50, literally, no exaggeration. And it was detrimental to the workouts and the things that I needed to be doing. But I was running up this hill. Now, fast forward to when I'm 29 and I'm here in San Francisco after this anxiety attack. I moved into an apartment here in San Francisco, and I didn't actually connect these dots until seeing this picture on Instagram very, very recently, almost like 6 weeks ago. This happened. I saw this picture and I was like, oh, I've run up that a ton. And then I had this memory of, what did I do when I was depressed? I ran from the bottom of my steps on Mission Street in San Francisco to the top of Twin Peaks every day for 90 days. I ran to the top of this hill. And when I look back on that experience, I'm now 37 years old. And this was before finding men's work and before having any idea about emotional awareness, embodiment, physical sensations in my body, breath work, connection, any of these things. What was I doing? I was running up and down that hill, and it was out of an inability to be able to sit with and to have the tools to get through what I was feeling. I was feeling all of this resistance and intensity, and my relationship with that was to fight. Right. And so I fought, and fighting, I'm going to say, is not, I want to be very careful of saying like one thing is fight, flight, or freeze is better or worse. But I think one of the constructive outcomes of the fight response is that you get agency, right? There's protection in that, in the fight. And I am thankful for that. But at the same time, it tore me apart. And when and then I was very lucky to have that year of trying all different kinds of things. And I got into design thinking and yoga and breath work, and found this program called Uncollege, which was a guided gap year program for high school students. And I ended up getting a job at this program and moved into a dorm room. And I had a whole year living with high school students, helping them learn things. Like, I was basically like a live-in RA coach who got to teach workshops and create on creativity, design thinking, getting a job, sales, communication, listening, feeling. And what did we do there? We did circles. We sat in a circle every Friday as a house, and we would check in. And one of the men that I invited to come in, and one of the individuals that I invited to come in as an influence, a thought leader, was then would become my business partner, Mike Sagoon. And he was a men's coach. And he came in and to talk with the students, and I got so enthralled with like what he was doing, and we teamed up on a project together, and he invited me to come to a men's retreat. And he actually invited me to organize it with him, and we organized the men's retreat together. And through that experience of doing the men's retreat, I found out that I was actually scared to invite men in my life to be a part of the men's retreat. And I didn't invite any of the men from my software sales days to come. And then we got to the retreat, and what happened? 3 of the men that were in that world with me had shown up. And I realized right there and then that this was something that was going on with me, about a vulnerability that I had, and that this isn't weird, and that this work is actually incredible, and that I had been judging these guys as being, oh, you look tough, so you wouldn't be interested in this stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, thanks for sharing all that. And I think the last point, it's interesting you mentioned that, because it was almost like you were projecting your own self onto them, right? In a way, because you had been the tough guy fighting through things, and you just assumed they would be the same, right? So no, and I appreciate your story, because I think it's important. We all kind of struggle through that. We don't know, like, and a lot of it does initiate from childhood, right? And we're too afraid to sit in stillness and face it, because we know the answers that are going to come out of it, and we're just too afraid to face it. And it's only when we do sit down and work through it is when we finally find that freedom, that liberation, and um, finally feel like we can be ourselves.
But also, I will say that I we do whatever we have to do to survive to get to where we are today,
Mhm.
right? To where
Mhm.
we are today, to where we are and where we're conscious and able to take care of our own needs. And when that happens, what I notice even in your description is like we don't sit with it, right? But we were never meant to sit with it alone. It was never
Mhm.
we were we were supposed to learn this when we were 3 years old or 5 years old, and our parents were supposed to learn this, and it's okay that they didn't teach
Mhm.
us. They didn't know. They weren't withholding anything from us. They just
Right.
didn't know, right? And I've met human beings who have had meditation and who have had uh, uh, somatic open soothing relationships with elders very early in their life. And that's I actually think that that's where our society and where manhood and our culture of go 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 has brought us. And so for me, I love one of the things we talk about a lot in the Unshakable Man is the fundamentals of spiritual psychology. And the fundamentals of spiritual psychology are that we are all born innocent. We're all born like as this innocent creature, right? And
Mhm.
we have our generational traumas and all of this stuff that gets put on to us. And then we move through our life and we do whatever we have to do to survive. And along the way, we come up with scripts, we come up with algorithms and ways of being
Mhm.
that the mind and the brain uses and the body to respond more quickly and save energy, right? And living consciously is when we get to a point where we can make a choice about those automatic reactions and taking a deep breath and going, when I notice I have a problem. And noticing having a problem is anytime I say the words I have a problem with in my head or out loud, or whenever my body tightens up. And if
Mhm.
I'm now that we just look at like how we're all the pandemic especially, like we're working constantly, we're tight, these are all physical sensations that tell our brain that something is wrong,
Mhm.
right? And so we have to relax and open and connect to it. And that process is like the opposite of what our egoic mind is telling us makes sense,
Mhm.
right? Like
Yeah.
my mind comes in and says, Chris, no, 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 no. You need to get back and write an email newsletter because, oh, geez, like if you don't go in there, or you need to do your taxes, or like, right, or you need to pay
Yeah.
the rent, or don't forget that thing you need to do for Anna. And it's like the opposite. So what I notice is with these circles, and I think you got to see this just with the three of us, and and this is what I think I hear from men is that wow, I'm so happy I gave myself this. Is it's like there's a real feeling of like, oh, there's like I see you in an office right now, right? And it's like, like he's here, he's got an earpiece and he's got a collared shirt on. You look like you and I could have worked together in ad sales,
Yeah.
right? Like, and I'm like, oh, like if he's here, I can be here. Maybe I can let my nervous system down,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
then we find out we're not here to have a conversation, right? Like, because we're not talking about our problems, we're experiencing. And I really, I know, like it's in my gut. I'm like, this can heal the world. Like this is
Mhm.
exactly, if only we could spread this to every man on earth.
Mhm.
This is how we heal and how we show up so that we can show up and be our true selves, right? Not whatever my reactions are, not how someone has hurt me in the past, not my most recent breakup, not my fear of being alone, right? Like, and it literally can change your life.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. And it's important to highlight that, in terms of even the group work, and that's the biggest piece. We often as men tell ourselves that I'm alone, I'm the only one dealing with this, I've got to keep it together. But what I felt was really powerful in that session was um, just letting go, and like I said earlier, being yourself and not feeling alone.
Mhm.
Whether your problem is big or small, we're all dealing with adversity in different ways. And the best way to support each other is through experiencing it together. And that's what I felt was I experienced what you shared. I experienced what the other individual shared. I could experience it and feel it, and then,
So,
yeah.
so something that's even cool, let's get even more deep into that, right? Is this has been huge for my relationship with my partner and my relationship with myself and my relationship with my mom, right?
Mhm.
From a healing perspective, is that when another human being, when another man sits in the space and he has he is having his experience, and then I have my experience, the emotional contagion. So there's 8 components of emotional awareness. Emotional contagion is one of them. And to be precise with for our own me search, is what I like to call it, is you did not make me feel something. When you had an experience, I felt something,
Mhm.
right? Like my experience is my experience and your experience is your experience. But in the passing of our day-to-day lives, we save time with our language and say something like, oh, I was feeling what you were feeling. And it's like, no, that's not, we don't actually know that. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know what you're feeling, and no one can tell you what you're feeling. No scientist, no test. It's one of the only things we literally cannot tell you, put
Mhm.
you through a test that says you're feeling fear. We can't. And so if you're, when you are having an experience, what was happening is my experience was placing a finger on something that reminded you of an experience, and then
Mhm.
that triggers a story and like a judgment, right, and a belief. And because we slow down and stay in our experience, we're able to be aware of these things coming up. And every time we do that, I think of it as like juggling. We're upgrading our awareness system, our connection between our brain and our mind and our body. And we're picking up all of these little tools from the men around us, right? Like
Mhm.
the way I speak, the way I coach myself and say the story in my head is something, or the emotional vocabulary words that I use. And so it's just this like amazing dojo.
Yeah, no, I agree. And yeah, thanks for breaking it down further, because you're right. Like, we can't tell someone what they're feeling, but through this work, experiencing it in ourselves is important. And that's where I feel the connection happens, right? That's where the brotherhood happens. And um yeah, I think it's so important. And like you said, it is powerful. If it can heal the world, that's amazing. But it's definitely powerful in that sense. So, I again just commend you for the work you're doing, and the journey you've taken. I guess one of the last questions I would have is, as you were making that transition from, your career to what you're doing now, what were some of the challenges you felt, or hurdles in making that transition?
I love how it's like from there till now. It's like man, I'm still in I'm still going through my own journey every day.
Mhm.
Um, I I think, to just speak from my own experience from even today, someone someone told me that like healing is a spiral.
Mhm.
It's not linear, and it's not even a mess. It's not even just up and down. It's literally like a 3D, 4D spiral. And I think if you had asked me that question every month or every 6 months of my life, it would have always been like, how do I show up to, I think it would have always been the same thing for me. It just would have been a different way it was coming across in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so for me, for me, in my experience, it's been really meeting with myself, realizing that um, I am not responsible for your feelings and your emotions, and that's not bad.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think in my upbringing, before I was even consciously aware, I was I was constantly worried about how my mother was feeling. I was constantly worried about how my father was feeling, and that anxious attachment style is pervasive, right? And it also creates some of my favorite parts of myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
As my identity of being like the guy that's like always the friend that's like going to call you up and be like, "Hey, how are you doing?" Or like the I love throwing parties, right? Like
Yeah.
I love throwing parties and not being the one in front of the thing, like just making sure everyone's happy,
Yeah.
right? So those are constructive outcomes of that. But a destructive one is really just being able to do this work, like to do the work of my dreams. Like this is literally my dream. I would do nothing else with my life. Like
Mm-hmm.
and it has been only in the past 3 years has it been to a place where I trust that. And
Mm-hmm.
then 2 years, and then 1 year. And now, like to be here, I still am reminded by those scary places in my mind of, am I safe? Right. And, uh, and so it was that trusting, like learning to trust myself. But what I will say, um, learning to trust myself and learning to love myself and learning to care for myself, as specifically as literally like just giving myself a hug and taking a bath, and like taking a bath, not a shower, like,
Mm-hmm.
right. And really taking care of myself. But then the funny thing is, as I look back on all of this, is the problems in my life are my curriculum, and we each have our own. I
Mm-hmm.
needed to go through this process to discover this,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that's one of the things we talk about all the time in this work, especially with guys that are new, is that, oh, great. Like all of a sudden I'm like, holy crap, I can feel stuff that I've never felt before. And that's when you know your awareness is increasing, is you have a perception of your awareness increasing.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, wait, we're not in this work to not have problems. Like, because that's the point, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
like you're becoming more aware. Now you start becoming more aware of more shittiness in your life.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and it's like, so with great awareness and more awareness, now you actually have to work more on more softening to those challenges. And it's just a deepening, like you're just deepening and deepening and deepening into it. And
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah. No, I agree. I think with that awareness, like you said, you're more willing to deal with the problems and work through them and identify them. And that's something I've experienced too, is, you're so afraid, or you're just so unaware of whatever you've been dealing with your whole life, and all of a sudden you work through it, and it's just more stuff keeps coming up, and
yeah.
and and you deal with that, you put that to bed, a new situation arises, and
Yeah,
it's never ending. But the best part is you become better at it, and
yeah.
like I said, and you said, you become more aware. So I think that's amazing that you've highlighted that. And I think the fact that you mentioned that, you are a certain way because of your childhood, and you can't feel bad or shame yourself for it, because it brings out all these positive qualities in you as well. But
Mhm.
it's being aware of some of the destructive stuff and working through that, so you can.
But I have shamed myself. Like
I know.
I
Yeah.
do. I just want to make sure that like I think that that's the um in my experience, like when you were saying the put it aside and then, or you
Mm-hmm.
get through this and then I get through this, is that um there's this other way of another way that I like to introduce into this is that there's the hard way and the open way. And the hard way and the open way, the hard way doesn't mean it's hard. They're
Mm-hmm.
both challenging. Um, they're momentary decisions. They're not decisions like on for a month or a week or a day. They're like for every moment of my life, every
Mm-hmm.
sensation. The hard way means to harden to something, and the open way means to soften or to open to it. And even if I harden, I might harden to be constructive, to go out and get a job, use that anger to take care of myself, to protect myself. And it's like, great, I'm hardening. But then after that period of time goes by, my next choice is to open,
Mm-hmm.
right? And to soften. And I think it's always in that pattern of like hardening and softening, almost like a juggling, because if we're completely open all the time, um, we ex- and we want to exist in this physical space, right? Like, then these are choices that we have to make, right? And so it's that choice to open to routinely open to that
Mm-hmm.
that difficulty, that challenge. And then I say it just automatically starts to change your life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, again, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. And I think it's all, everything you said is really valuable. And I hope the listeners can get that. I guess for people that want to find you social media online, I know you've touched on the Unshakable Man, but what are the best
Mhm.
ways to get a hold of you and even be a part of your men's group and program?
Yeah, I would love any man anybody who identifies as male to just head over to unshakableman.com, and we offer just free drop-in passes to join the community and to come experience stuff. And then once you experience it, if you want to support the brotherhood, you can then become a supporting member. And we offer this at a sliding scale as well, because it's really a major part of our values and my values that this work be accessible. And that's, I'd say, the next mission of us is to become sustainable, to be able to sustain as a brotherhood. And if they want to find me personally, I'm Chris Lee Wilson on Instagram, and just Christopher Wilson and everywhere else online, but at the Unshakable Man on Instagram. And also this podcast, I think, like it's just a real gift to be able to be reached out to by you, and for you, the way that you took that safe risk of vulnerability. Even though it's safe, that is scary. I mean, you showed up in our group like without, and I mean, dude, I think that really says a lot about how you show up, and for me. So
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And, again, commend you for all the work you're doing and the difference you're making. So, yeah, it's been amazing. And just to be a part of that experience, I'm super grateful for it. So thank you
mhm.
again.
Thank you.
Well, that's the end of the episode. Thank you again for tuning in and showing your support. Until next week.